Today, the African Development Bank and the African Union Commission unveiled a new Africa's Macroeconomic Performance and Outlook report. The report x-rays the various aspects of the continent's economy, progress being made, as well as outlook. The inaugural event, held just before the opening of the African Union Summit, featured key policy leaders, finance ministers, economists, and so many others. So let's take a listen to the AFDB's president, Dr. Adesina, as he summarized the report launch event.
We must have a resolution of the debt issues in Africa. There are three fundamental areas there. We used to have, of course, we had the debt service suspension initiative. I think given the tightening of the fiscal space for our countries, there's certainly a need for us to make sure that that actually gets further extended to give breathing room. Of course, we heard from the Minister of Finance of Zambia about the G20 Common Framework. That's actually a great framework, because in getting the creditors all together to look at what needs to be done, both on the public side, but also on the private side. But we need to make faster progress on that. We have this for Ethiopia, we have it for Zambia, we have it for Chad. But as we heard from the Minister of Zambia, we need faster progress on that. We all need to work collectively on that. Of course, the critical issue we have to make sure we do is to make sure that low-income countries have access to much-needed low-cost financing for their development. And we must also realize that if you take the Sahel, for example, take Niger, take Mali, take Chad, take Burkina Faso, many of these countries are spending so much of their resources on one issue that we have not talked about today, which is on security. And we just have to make sure that the development financing is going downwards, but expenditure on security continues to go up. So all the things that we are talking about today, we cannot achieve them unless we do a fundamental rethinking of the development paradigm itself. We have to now realize that insecurity or security, it's not an exogenous factor in the development process. Security is an endogenous factor, and therefore we must actively link together security with investment, with growth and development, and make sure that we come up with innovative tools to support many of these fiscally challenged countries that are facing insecurity to be able to get additional financing. We are leading a lot of work on this with security index investment bonds, to working together with the African Union Commission. And this is very important for us to bear in mind. I also think that we need to, I need to say that the progress that we are making at the African Development Bank in terms of taking the African Development Fund, which is the bank's facility for low-income countries, to the market, it's a very, very significant one, because with that, we will be able to raise an additional $33 billion for these low-income countries. So again, making sure that we use the equity we have to leverage the capital markets will be a key part of leveraging more resources for these low-income countries. There's no doubt that we must also mobilize domestic resources. Yes, we have had that. We have to mobilize savings. We need to improve in tax collection and so on. But let's not forget, it's not just about collecting more taxes. It's about how the taxes are used. And I've always said that Africa has perhaps one of the highest implicit tax rates in the world, in the sense that we collect taxes, but governments do not do what they should do in most cases, to transfer most of this to the government, to the citizens. So the citizens have to provide electricity, they have to provide water, they have to provide their own insurance, they have to also make sure that they can send their kids to school. And so we have to make sure that taxes that are collected are used effectively for the citizens. So there has to be issue of tax accountability, even as we talk about mobilizing more domestic resources. I want to also say I agree with what has been said about the issue of debt, but public financial management, we must continue to keep our eyes on that. Yes, we need more space for that, but I think I just want to add that we need also to look at the important debt. We can't develop only just on debt, though. We have to make sure that we open greater space for the private sector, especially investment, which you all talked about. We ought to also develop a lot of local capital markets and focus more as well on mobilizing local currency financing to deal with some of the mismatch in terms of currency mismatch that you have. You have projects and infrastructure that are being done in local currency in terms of revenue, but also the loans you're taking are actually in foreign currency. And as Professor Rama said, as depreciation happens and the cost of financing those things go up. So we do need to prioritize and develop our local capital markets to mobilize a lot more local currency for financing infrastructure and other things. We've heard about the importance of illicit capital flows. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of governance. Let's make sure that we have better governance, cut back on illicit capital flows, and make sure that we put our monies in our continent, not outside the continent. The issue that I also want to say as we look at the importance of private investment, which Minister Ahmed just said, is the need for us to do two things. We have to de-risk, then we have to develop bankable projects. So we had the AU Commission Summit with NEPAD recently in Dakar, and we are working very closely with AU out and NEPAD on this particular issue. Let's make sure that we are focusing on quality infrastructure, de-risking these projects, but developing quality projects that can be financed. Now, we should also focus on the issue of climate change. It's a big issue. We talked about it a bit tangentially, but this is going to be the biggest challenge that Africa faces. And we at the African Development Bank are doing our best with the African Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion to support African countries to adapt to climate change, which is critical for us. And in closing, I just want to reemphasize what I said earlier. This is the time for us to work as a system to really optimize the global financial architecture. We need to optimize the balance sheets of the multilateral development banks. And Professor Jeffrey Sachs, thank you for the shout out for the African Development Bank. As I said, take the SDRs, for example. We can leverage those XDR by 3 to 4 times. And we are working very closely, Jeff, with Kristalina right now and our team with the Inter-American Development Bank on a model that we presented to them that they're looking at quite positively on how we can actually access these SDRs and then have this multiplicative effect to be able to deliver more for Africa. A $10 billion will become $30 to $40 billion. If a $20 billion can easily become $60 billion to $80 billion for Africa. So optimizing that global financial architecture is going to be very, very critical. IMF focusing on the global macroeconomic fiscal stability, us, the multilateral development banks, focusing on sectoral issues that many of you have talked about today.